Hey home bakers, it's Jack here at bakewithjack.co.uk, bringing you your weekly bread making tip every single Thursday. And this week I'm going to talk about slowing down your dough to fit it into your schedule. Hey you guys, welcome back. A couple of weeks ago I spoke about speeding up the bread making process to fit it into our busy lives, and we came to the conclusion that it probably is not a very good idea because you sacrifice too much in terms of flavour and texture of your final bread. And if you missed that video, I will link it up either up here somewhere or underneath in the description box. At the end of the video, you may notice that I hinted that slowing down the bread making process is probably a better way of fitting into your schedule than speeding it up is. And that might sound like a little bit like the wrong way around, like I've lost my marbles, but don't worry too much because it's true. Now, we already said that bread making is long, and rightly so. It is a long process. That's how we make bread in the first place. That's what makes it great. But anyway, the point of the matter is you do a few things and you rest in between. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. So we make the dough and then we rest it. We shape the dough and then we rest it, and then we bake it and then we eat it. So with that in mind, if you haven't got time to do all of that in one go, you can elongate the resting stages to fit it into your busy schedule. The rate that your bread dough puffs up, the rate that it rises depends upon temperature. I'm talking about the temperature of your room, the temperature of your dough, the temperature of your water you put in. And I always recommend, especially from a beginner's point of view, that you use room temperature water. You must be sick of that by now. So if everything's at room temperature and it stays at room temperature because you rest it up in the room, it's going to prove up at the correct rate that the room temperature will prove it up at. Therefore, if your room is cooler, it's going to happen slower, and if it's warmer, it's going to happen faster. Make sense? So if you want to elongate those resting periods to fit around our busy lives, you've got a couple of options, but both of them require the dough to be cooler. So if it's cooler, it rises up slower while you go and do whatever it is what you need to do. So, for example, you can A, make the dough cooler by using cooler water, therefore making the dough cooler, making everything happen slower. Or B, you can go and put the dough in a cold place. For example, the refrigerator, or outside in the car if it's chilly outside. Or some people got a really cold, freezing cold cupboard in their kitchen that's next to an exterior wall. Pop it in there if you want. But whatever you do, you are in fact cooling it down, slowing it down, so you're ready to resume the process whenever you are ready. Let me give you an example. I don't know what you do on a daily basis. Maybe you go to work 9 to 5. Who knows? I don't. Sometimes I do. It's a mess, to be honest with you. So how about taking 20 minutes in the morning to knock up a nice bread dough? How wonderful. Fresh bread dough knocked up into the morning time, and then you can pop it into the fridge and go off and have a nice time at work. Upon returning from work at, I don't know, I'm guessing 6, let's say for argument's sake, you return from work at 6 o'clock. Take that dough out of the fridge, leave it on the side for an hour or so, let it just come back to life. Let it just adjust itself to the outside temperature so you don't scare it too much, and then shape it up into a loaf, let it prove up for a further hour, bake. Then what's happened is you got home at 6 o'clock and your bread is ready by 9. Then you can have a couple of cheeky slices with butter and jam before you go to bed. Yeah. And it's all ready for the morning for your sandwich that you take to work next day in a brown paper bag or whatever, or your toast in the morning, for example. And that's an example of cooling it down and elongating that first period. You can still, if you wanted, elongate that second period, but it's a little bit more tricky and requires a bit of practice. For that first resting period, it doesn't really matter what happens. It can rise up and collapse down. We've spoken about that before. It doesn't matter. You're going to shape it into a loaf anyway and bake it later, so it's not an issue. For the second one, what's going to happen is you might have shaped it up real nice into a bloomer or whatever. It puffed up and then it collapsed back down, which is upsetting. However, if you don't mind a little bit of risk and you don't mind a little bit of failure, what you can do is try it out. Elongate that second resting period. Shape up your bloomer, whatever you're making, and put that into the fridge. See what it's like in the morning. You might be able to whip it out of the fridge and put it straight into the oven in the morning for 40 minutes before you go to work, whatever you're doing, and they might be perfect. Who knows? But whatever you do, if you're experimenting at that point, always make a note of everything. I've spoken about a bread making diary before. Always write stuff down. Write down the time in the evening that you shaped it for the next day. Write down the temperature in the room or the temperature the dough was when that happened, and then put it into the fridge. Then write down what time you took it out of the fridge, whether it was resting for 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, I don't know how long you sleep for. And then have a look at it in the morning and write down what it was like. How big had it got in your eyes? Was it much bigger than what it was? Had it just grown a little bit? And finally, bake it and then write down exactly what it was like. If it was a roaring success or if it was an absolute failure. That is the only way you're going to know whether you can get away with that sort of stuff overnight, because elongating that second resting period is a little bit more tricky. So whatever you're doing in the day, whether you're going to work, whether you're rushing out and getting kids and whatever and picking them up from school and dropping them off and going to do the shopping or whatever it is, you can fit stuff into your schedule, and the best way, in my eyes, to do it is to slow down those resting gaps and slot in those stages that you need to be there when you are there, and that's how you can make it work. But always write stuff down, because you ain't going to remember. Seriously, sometimes I think to myself, oh, don't worry about it. I'll remember what I've done there because I had to go and do that one thing. And then I came back again and it took me probably that. I won't remember it. Seriously, write it down, every single little thing, so you know exactly what to remember. And then you'll know, you slot it into your schedule, whether that's regular or irregular, and you know what you can do about it, and you know you can figure it out and have wonderful fresh bread all the time. That's it. I hope this video has helped you out. If you want to see that video I did about speeding up bread and why it's not a good idea, click the link that I'll put either there or there. And yeah, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you next week for another bread making tip. See ya. Bye bye.